Hello and welcome to another episode of A Quick Glance. This episode will be about the Azure Developer CLI, short AZD. I think I will make several videos about the Azure Developer CLI, so within this video we will take a first glance at this new tool of Microsoft. So as you can see here from the blog post, from the introductory blog post, it came out now, well, about 1.5 months ago, and is in a public preview. Now, what is the Azure Developer CLI all about? Well, it's about making the life of developers easier, and from my perspective, making also the life of enterprises easier by, well, taking away all the difficult pieces when you do development from a technical perspective. So really just the infrastructure, setting up a build pipeline, making sure that the code is, or the setup of the code with respect to cross-functional requirements like monitoring, like security, is uniform and compliant. Now, basically what the AZD does, and that's all described here within the introductory blog post, is it gives you several commands that wrap several steps in providing infrastructure on Azure and deploying code there and wiring things up. And it's based on a templating approach. So as you can see here, the command line is AZD, and there is obviously a command that is up. And there you specify a template, and there are several templates, which we'll see in a second, that allow you to set up a sample application. So here it's a to-do app. Now, the Azure Developer CLI builds upon the Azure CLI, but it's not really an extension of that one. It's a separate tool, so something to keep in mind. So there is the Azure CLI, which is the CLI which allows you to interact with Azure. And the Azure Developer CLI is kind of a more higher level of abstraction. Now, what does it help you? Where does it support you? Well, when you start developing, and that's very well coined within the blog post, when you do development and you have to solve a business problem, well, you don't want to wrap your head around each and every time what cloud services should I use? What cloud services may I be allowed to use within an enterprise? How should I set up my local development? What is the best practices to set up the infrastructure? What is the best practices with respect to security, with respect to observability, and so on and so forth? And here the Azure Developer CLI tries to give you some kind of a paved road and some best practices at hand using the templating approach to, well, make your life easier with respect to these aspects. Now, there are several commands within the Azure Developer CLI which go along a developer workflow. So basically, you first initialize your project, then you provision the infrastructure, then you deploy your application. You want to monitor it, and there is also one step for pipeline configuration. And of course, there is some support on the Azure Help or the Microsoft Help documents that guide you through the CLI, which we will take a look in a second. Now, there are several templates available which give you a head start, making use of Bicep for the infrastructure. And currently the supported languages are Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, and C#. Java is on the roadmap, so this should also come soon. Now, before we now walk through the complete blog post, let's jump over to the CLI and let's try to make our hands dirty, and let's see what is needed in order to get started with the Developer CLI. Basically, there is the section, what is the Azure Developer CLI, which kind of nicely sums up how to integrate the CLI into your workflow. So basically, it's selecting a template, deploying and setting up your workflow, and then setting up your pipeline and doing the provisioning and the deployment via DevOps via a pipeline on Azure DevOps or via a pipeline on GitHub, namely GitHub Actions. Now, there are, as I said before, several templates that you can use in order to set up everything. And there is a Node.js, a Python, and a C# area. C#, I think, is quite slim, yes. There are not that many templates yet. So we will anyway stick to Node.js-based applications. And as you can see here, every template is connected to some kind of infrastructure that is used. And there are, for Node.js as well as for Python, 3 templates that always have a to-do app, which is kind of the business context that they are covering, based on Node.js or Python, and a MongoDB. The MongoDB is the Mongo interface to Cosmos DB, or the Mongo API for Cosmos DB. And the app host can be an Azure App Service. It can be an Azure Container App. This is what we will use. And it also can be Azure Static Web Apps in combination with Azure Functions. Now, that's what you can use as a starter. That's what's officially supported by Microsoft. And yeah, with that, you can now use different development environments with the Azure Developer CLI. You can, of course, use your bare metal. This is what you will see within this video and also within the other videos. So you just install all the dependencies locally, which means you have to install them and you have to also keep them up to date. So that's something that you can do, but there is also the option to use dev containers and VS Code remote containers. So basically there is a dev container definition within the templates that will give you everything that you need on your within your dev container. And of course, if there is dev container support, there is GitHub Codespaces support. So again, all dependencies are then installed for you. So you do not have to think about the dependencies and to install everything. So that's, yeah, as usual, the pros and cons between pure local installation on bare metal versus a development container, which probably makes more sense in an enterprise context to roll that out to your developers, because then everybody's using the same version and the same tooling. Yeah, as I said before, there are some hosts that are already supported, which is the App Service, Azure Functions, Static Web Apps in combination, and Azure Container Apps. And well, Azure Kubernetes Services is on the roadmap. So I would guess when this thing goes GA, Azure Kubernetes Service will be fully supported. Languages, that's also something that we already talked about. So Java is coming soon. The rest, the usual suspects, Node.js, Python, and .NET is fully supported. Now, that was the theory. Now let's get started. So what can we do in order to get started? Well, first, of course, we need to configure our development environment. So what we have to do is we have to install several prerequisites. Now, I have installed everything on my Windows machine. I have also tried it out on WSL too. So basically Linux, which also works perfectly fine. I have not tried it out on macOS because I don't have a Mac system at hand. Now, what you have to have installed is Git, because that is used in order to do the versioning of your template. What you need is the GitHub CLI, and here you see that there is version 2.3. That's not true. So I already created a pull request for that one. It's version 2.13. That is the minimum. Currently, the GitHub CLI is on 2.14. Then you need the Azure CLI, of course, because you have to interact with Azure. That's also something that I have installed before. I also did the authentication stuff, which is quite straightforward. And then, of course, you need to install the Azure Developer CLI, which is currently done via when you are on Windows via this PowerShell command, or on Linux via curl and execution in bash. That works quite fine. The only thing that is a question mark for me is how to update things, because currently we are in beta and the Azure Developer CLI is quite fresh. So it would be interesting to see in the future how to easily upgrade the Azure Developer CLI. All the other things, I mean, if you're working with Azure, you probably have used them. You can install them on Windows via Chocolate or via, I think, Winget is also an option. So that's quite easy to install and also to keep up to date. Now, of course, depending on the language that you use, you need the corresponding runtime, be it Node.js, be it Python, be it .NET. Now, with Node.js, there is, of course, support for the LTS versions, which perfectly makes sense. Now, with that, you can, so if you have everything installed that is here, you can then already fire up your first application. Now, what is important and what I overread on the first one is go to your terminal and create a new empty directory. Because when you fire up the Azure Developer CLI via either azd-up or azd-init, it will clone a GitHub repository locally. And if you do that in your main directory, you might be quite, let's say, busy in cleaning things up. So, okay, that's what we will do. And then we will run the following command, which is the azd-up. And there we have the template parameter, which is to do Node.js Mongo. I think we will not use Mongo, but we want to use another template, namely the ACA template, which is, it's not directly written here, so we will now jump to the GitHub repo. So it's all the samples are on GitHub, also with a short description again. And this is the command that we will use in a second. Now, yeah, let's try it out and let's see what happens. Let's first take a short look at the to-do application with Node.js on Azure Container Apps with within the GitHub repo. So there is an extensive README what you have to do and how things should look like at the end of the day. And here is something that you have to keep in mind. If you are using Azure Container Apps, there might be additional prerequisites. So in this case, you also have to have Docker up and running. If this is not the case, well, the deployment will probably fail because the build of the container is done via Docker. So it's not just Azure Developer CLI, CLI, Node.js, and Git and GitHub CLI. Depending on the environment that you use, you might have additional prerequisites, and especially Docker might be quite a topic in a company due to the changed licensing that Docker put in place quite some time ago. Okay, so then I would say we copy that command and then execute it and see what happens. Probably there will be some interaction that we need to do. So let's take a look here. You will be prompted for the following information: environment name. Okay, so basically the deployments or the deployments are structured via environments. So you can think of that as for example, dev test prod or something like that, or sandbox and some other environments. So you can structure them and can then also reference different files in there. We will see that later. Then, of course, we need an Azure location and Azure subscription because it's deployed there. Now, there is one important thing as we are using Cosmos DB and as there are some issues with the availability of Cosmos DB. Be aware that within every template that you use, check in which region the template is supported. because otherwise you might run into issues and the provisioning step might fail due to a non-availability of the resources. Yeah, with that, I would say I already copied that one, right? So let's switch to the terminal. And first I want to show you that I have an empty directory, which I'm not yet in. So I have sandbox and quick runs AZD. I prepared that. So that's definitely here. And now let's copy this command in. I think I make it a bit bigger for you. So let's clear it and let's copy it in. So AZD up, template, Node.js, and then let's see if there are some prompts. So it now downloads the template, then please enter an environment. So I would say that's quick glance. Let's call it QG, AZD up test. Oh, let's just call it AZD test. That's cryptic enough so that nobody understands it, but good for us. Now this is something that is a bit weird. So it kind of repeats the data entry. I don't know if that's a bug or not. And then we have to enter the location. It defaults to 41, which is also, yeah, okay-ish. So I need to go to Europe, which is then up. So West Europe would be probably the closest one to me. And then I will take my subscription. And then, well, things should start. So everything should be now getting started in the background. So as you can see here, you can now switch to the portal and check the progress. So I will open that up in the background, and then we will take a look at that. And now it starts to create the resources. Now I will also switch again to the directory. And as you can see now, it's no longer empty. So we have a lot of entries in there. And yeah, I think we will take a dedicated look at the code in an upcoming video. Now I just want to see how things get up, but as you can see, there is a lot of information in there. Some of those stuff is quite intuitive. Like infra, I would guess there's the infrastructure in the source code. I think there is the source code in there, but that's a topic of a different one. And as you can see here, there is already quite some stuff that gets created. The counting is kind of weird. So I think there is overall 14 resources that will be created. So it's approximately 8. So that's okay. And now let's check the browser. So what we will see here is no, I didn't want to do that. That the resources get created. So the resource group that is using our environment and then putting the RG in front, which I think is best practice, is created. So the resources are now getting created. As you can see here, we already have quite some stuff that is created up to now. So we have keyboard, we have a container registry. Cosmos DB, of course, takes some time. We have operational insights and so on. So this is now everything that gets created. There is also a nice overview within the GitHub repository. First of all, how things should end up and how the application is structured. So if we take a look at this too big image, so let's keep it here. We have our container app, which has 2 basically two container apps in it. One is the web app, so one is the front end, and one is the API app, which is the back end on Node.js, and the front end is in React. This stuff is, of course, Dockerized, so it's put in a container registry, which we already saw gets created, and it's interacting with Cosmos DB via the Mongo API. It is connected to the Azure Monitor, and it's using Key Vault and secrets for secure connections. I think there is also a bit more information about security in here. I think it's here. Yeah, there are some roles that are getting created, mainly some managed identities, and you have the key vault for the Cosmos DB connection string. So that's quite cool. So you can see there what's happening and what's best practice. Yeah, let's shortly check how far we are. So as you can see here, we have now 12 out of 13. Before that, it was 8. And yeah, with that, let's shortly wait until things are finished. And we are back. Everything has finished now, as you can see within the terminal. So all Azure resources are created. And then after that, the infrastructure is available, and the AZDUp command in the next step deploys the services for me. So it creates the images. And after creation of the images, it pushes it to the container registry within Azure that we created somewhere here. Where do I find it? Probably I'm blind, but it should be somewhere in the resources. And then we have our web front end, so our React.js front end, and we have our service API, which is available under the URLs that you can see here. And now, first things first, let's try out the web interface, and let's see what we will see. So I will again jump to the browser, and as you can see, we can see the to-do app, and I think it should work. So let's add a test item, and we can then put in some description, test. We can even set a due date, and we can put it in progress. We can create a new list. It's just another list. So I have my list, I have another list, I can add an item, another test. So everything looks quite good. So that seems to work. Now let's see how things look like behind the scenes. So I have opened up here the resource group that was created by the AZDUp command. And here you see all the resources that have been created. So what we have, let me put that up a bit, an application insights resource. We have two container apps. One is the API, one is the web. We have a container app environment. Of course, everything is quite cryptic. I mean, we have the right prefixes. The UUIDs are kind of not so well readable. We have our Cosmos DB. We have the container app environment that you need for the container apps as a dedicated resource. We have our container registry, which should contain 2 containers if I'm not completely wrong. So here we have the overview. Here you see we have some image pulls. We have some image pushes. That looks quite good. When we take a look at the repositories, there are 2 repositories, one for the API and one for the web, so that looks decent. And of course, we have our container apps. So everything is in place, I would say, and available. We have the Cosmos DB, and all the other stuff that is quite useful from my perspective when you first set things up, like those dashboards, the log analytics workspace, as well as the application insights. That's all perfectly wired up, as is the Cosmos DB wire connection to the container apps. So that is really good. It's working from my perspective. So we can save that, of course. That doesn't look too shabby. It's not really, well, the UI is not well designed, so it's not really responsive, but okay. Yeah, so that's already it. So basically we just really need to key in AZD up, use a template, and we have a completely fledged app available with a backend, a front end. We did not have to care about observability. All things get wired up quite decently, as far as we could say up to now. So yeah, that looks cool. And then what we want to do, of course, is to clean up the resources after that, because that was just a test run. So let's do that. So we will copy AZD down, and we will switch to the terminal again and put that in. And let's see what happens. So we are in the directory where the app is living, so all the information should be there. And now things should get torn down to some extent. This will delete 11 resources, so it's now 11. Funny. Yeah, let's delete that. This will delete one key vault. Okay, there is some special well, security question around the key vault, because this might really mess things up if you have reused that. So in my case, no, I did not reuse that, just put it away. And then it will delete the Azure resources, which will again take some time. So let's check back in when things are finished. And we are back after quite some time, as you can see here from the timestamp. So it took it around 20 minutes or 18 minutes in order to delete all resources. So AZD down now brought everything down. No more resources within Azure in this resource group RG. So we can also, of course, check that this resource group is not there anymore. So as you can see, I can totally refresh. You do not see that anymore. And yeah, within the terminal, basically the output is a bit slim from my perspective. So yeah, you say AZD down, then you have those two questions, and when it's finished, it just returns to the prompt. I would have hoped to have some summary or something like that, which tells you, hey, everything was successfully deleted, and yeah, something like that, some summary. But yeah, that's what it is at the moment. So we are then basically through the quick start. So we saw what the Azure Developer CLI is good for, or what's the intention behind the Azure Developer CLI, which is basically this little thingy here. So what is the Azure Developer CLI? And then we had a quick walk through the Getting Started guide using Node.js as programming language, doing things on bare metal, and using the Azure Container Apps in order to get things running. And we got everything running with the template, and we also brought everything successfully down again. And yeah, with that, I'm at the end of this video. There will be some more about the Azure Developer CLI, as we did not yet look at everything. So stay tuned for more videos. And with that, always be curious, and see you next time.